And next up on this side, I'll be doing draft 3 of the back room. Out of Ava's epoxy, I've got a trick. I'll have to get some skewer sticks or dowels, and we'll be using the roller. A little plastic wrap, and we'll definitely need some tape. Once the sheet is rolled out, it'll get pressed into place here with special fittings for that and this. 2x2. Hands of blue. And we're going to have some fun with epoxy today. Ava's epoxy to be specific. So what I'm trying to do is replicate this shell right here. And initially I took silhouettes of the single wall pieces that are available, traced those, and basically just stretched a piece of plastic across so you can see how flat it is as opposed to the angle of the ship that it should be. So I think that's always been an issue for the fit, but it hasn't been the only one. And every time that I've gone to make a modification to try and fit the ship a little better, it's never quite been right on, so I've changed the size and the surface, and essentially this piece is, I'll take the front off and rebuild it with the new piece. Draft 1 was basically just a single cast wall piece and a back piece which was formed onto the inside of this guy here. Draft 2 saw this one a little thicker than I'd like. I'm hoping to tone it down for this next version, and one of my YouTube subscribers had commented on a way to do that, and I'm sorry I forget your name if you happen to see this video. Definitely let me know in the comments again. The idea is you take wooden dowels or other such objects that are the same thickness, and whatever you want your Ava's or whatever putty to be rolled to, put those at the edges and roll down until you get them. Previously I was just doing big squares, and that was resulting in a lot of lost area for the putty. So my idea now is to get the shape right off the bat from the start. I guess I don't need these yet. So what's the trouble with the back room? It's depicted in one way to suggest that it should look a different way. How do I mean? For simplicity of stage construction, they only needed 4 walls. One of them was moved several times over the show as a stage trick. However, the room theoretically was designed to look like it should be this. So with stage reality on the right, if the window were flat against the wall, it would have a very great travel distance, which you could argue is good for protection in the room. However, the way the window is painted, it suggests that the room should be this volume here, which makes a bit more sense following the contours of the outer hull. The difference? On this kind of stage, you can put a poster on the back wall where it wouldn't fit here. However, this room has also been depicted with a poster on this wall, and that the wall goes back and cuts across at this line here. So there are several ways that the back room can be done, and how to get them to fit inside the hull and have it all close up is the trick that's been thwarting me so far. So as mentioned, I had been rolling square flats of this. So what I'm going to do now is actually get some scientific measuring going on. And I want the maximum size to be somewhere right in here. It seems to be a pretty good representation. You'll also notice one of the changes I've made in here. When I originally drilled this outer hole, it was offset, and I've been trying to repair it ever since and get the curvature back. As part of that repair, I put in this patch over here, re-drilled through there, and puttied around it. As you can see, in the back of each of these is the impression of that square. So I've taken this gaffer's tape, put 3 layers of it down, which equals the plastic in there. I didn't get too close up here nor down there. What I want is for the AVIS to lay down against this surface, and that will create a natural buffer for additional padding on the clearance room. And of course it should be set something like this here. So I only need that much space. So there's about the actual space that I'm looking for right there. Take a last look at the last draft. These walls are definitely far too meaty. The stick is still a little thick, but it's definitely going to be more consistent than this. When I rolled out this piece, I was using a wooden roller, and it would often get stuck to the surface, so I had to put plastic wrap over it to protect that. In this case, I've got myself a silicone roller, and this should help on the adhesion problems by, if not eliminating completely, just about getting rid of them altogether almost completely. That's relatively flat, certainly flat enough. I'll be cutting a swath about this large. So one question when mixing any 2-part epoxy, putty, or any other similar situation is, what do you do with the leftovers? In my case, Godzilla steps in and helps out. So as part of the Jupiter 2 project, I've also been fixing up my Godzilla. I'll have to spray this with primer right now because once I have extra, it goes straight on to him. And that is what I am doing next. Well, it was working for a little bit. Well, it definitely peels right off. Now, clearly I'm going to need a little more, but so far this technique is working out well. One downside is that the roller runs out of parallel angles, which wasn't something I thought of at the time. And I can face the fact that most of this up here isn't needed up here. Okay, and the panel is free. Next up, getting all this nonsense out of here. Got this thin piece of plexiglass here. Alright, let's not risk that again. Now the idea, here's where these blue gloves come in real handy, because the AVIS doesn't like to stick to it at all. And that's about all there is to do for this. I don't know whether I should have gone in with the water smoothing. It was pretty smooth to begin with. While I had hoped these pads would keep the whole thing elevated, basically it just sunk straight into all the depressions. So if this doesn't work out, I'm going to have to do a full backing and make sure it's exact. But at the very least, it's definitely finger smooth. I'm very sure I don't need most of this, but I don't know how much I do need, so I have to keep it all. And the next time, I'm not going to do any more work with the AVIS. I want to let this sit, but the next thing I'll have to do is cut out some new sidewall blanks. and turning over here, I may redo this again. So looking at it after I had thought I had finished, I realized that that was a fairly significant amount of lip there. And I don't know exactly where the floor will end, so that's definitely a big question for how all this is really going to work and fitting together, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to put the space behind there as well. Very much to my surprise, the tape lines are showing through. I did not expect that at all. I figured that would be a completely smooth thing. There's a dip in here, there's wrinkles there, and basically, while I had thought that the tape ledge would support it in between spaces, it definitely did not do that at all. This is a pretty good look at what the surface underneath looks like, especially this area here. I had thought I was smoothing it out with my finger, but maybe I was just reinforcing it all entirely. So let us pull this off for the first time. The backing still has the saran wrap on it. So looking at what's going on here, I don't know that I really need to have this tape in here in the first place. The masking tape at least. Essentially this is pretty clean, and the reason why I wanted it is so that it would stay clean and undamaged, but if this is the extent of it with the saran wrap on here, maybe I'll put another piece in here overall and then press double saran wrap into it, and I think that's most likely. Then once it's in place, rather than poking a hole with my finger to figure out where it's going to go with the outside, I think drawing a circle on the outside would be the better way to go there. Yeah, definitely. That will leave the inside completely smooth, no distortions. I do expect to be putting a styrene ring around here and dressing it up just a little to completely match, but essentially this thickness will be the tunnel. It's like the 1706 sand, I think, or is it 1735? I don't know. It's the darker of the two though. That tunnel essentially leads to the outside there, so this is going to be fairly thick still. And then it's just a silver ring around that, and then some artwork on the inner wall, if this all goes according to plan. Another factor here is that this is far larger than it needs to be. So now if we line all of these up, it will go somewhere like that, and it does look like the wall will be long enough. But what I'll probably do is put this wainscoting blocker in here, because that would be semi-accurate, I think. There are some reference photos where there is a line going across, and it looks just like a strip of molding, but essentially in a three-dimensional room like this that follows the outer hull instead of the cube that they made, that would be about correct for what it is. And then a poster on that wall, and possibly a computer case. What looks like a computer case shows up every now and then. So for today's task, it looks like I'll be pulling out this masking tape completely. I don't know what I'll do about that lip, but we'll take a look at that in a second. But first, let's take a look at this. So despite all my precautions on getting that tape, despite all my precautions getting that saran wrap flat, still wound up with this kind of surface. I had an idea. Still a good learning experience.